Hello, guys, and welcome back to this new episode. Today, we are going to discuss and talk about socialites and their scandals brutal, absolutely devastating scandals. The first protagonist that we are going to discuss is Barbara Daley Beckland. She marries in 1940, so she married such um, Brooks Beckland, who was connected to the Beckland family that was extremely rich because of somebody in the family was inventor of plastic. Anyway, she married him, and she just right before getting married, she faked pregnancy. That's usually a sign that things are slightly off. But anyway, she married it, and then 6 years later, she has her first child, that is Anthony. Anthony wasn't exactly born in one of the happiest family because all the two parents, both of them, they had serious problems. They were cycling through depression, and also they were in a very relatively unhappy, if you like, marriage, in a sense that they both had multiple affairs, right? So he was born, and already when he's like a child, he manifests this like little signs of something off with him, of something wrong with him. But Barbara and Brooks, they both decide not to send him to a psychotherapist. And on top of that, Barbara seems to be proud of this drawings that Anthony makes by showing them off for dinner. But the drawings in questions were very disturbing. Things only get worse though, because we reach the stage of teenager. So Anthony becomes a teenager, and then what happens there is an adolescent, right? And he brings home a male lover. Barbara completely hates this, right? She's very, very against her son being an homosexual, and so the two also they will leave for Morocco to use drugs. Anyway, Barbara is very much against this. We can assume that some fights, some arguments had already started by that time. And when Anthony comes back home, he will bring, instead, this time around, a new girlfriend, Sylvie. Her name is Sylvie Spanish, but what happens is that Brooks starts flirting with Sylvie. He eventually gets more and more serious with her, and the end result of this is that the two, meaning Sylvie and Brooks Beckland, at this point the father, the father of Anthony, they start having a relationship, a serious relationship, not a fling. So serious that Brooks Beckland this time around files for divorce. In 1968, after 3 attempts to commit suicide, Barbara will eventually concede divorce. And amazingly here, something crazy happens. That is, the two, meaning the mother and the son, they will leave for a holiday to get rested. But here things complicate themselves one more time. That is because they go to Ibiza. I mean, after a series of adventures, they actually managed to go to Ibiza. And there, first Barbara was trying to cure Anthony's homosexuality, and so was paying for prostitutes mostly. But there something else happens. They started like dating, and these dates became more and more romantic, with a dim light of candles. And it is rumored, and possibly to be believed, that actually the two went on and slept together. They actually had sex together. Now, of course, we weren't there, and so we should put allegedly, but the truth is that all things combined, right, they do seem to coincide. So basically, they started having sex. The idea behind this was, at least according to Barbara or Barbara's mind, the idea behind this was simple. If no other woman can cure my son, then I will cure myself, my son. And basically, the idea was, the other women are not true women, and once he has sex with me, this is what Barbara was thinking. Once he has sex with me, then naturally, he will be heterosexual. What happens is inevitably that the relationships between Anthony and the rest of the family members do worsen quickly, and they spiral down inevitably, right? So one day they're back at home in their house of London, and Anthony probably asks her mother to invite one male friend. The mother refuses, so he goes to the kitchen, picks a knife, and actually with one stabbing actually kills her. After that, he will call a Chinese restaurant to have some food, and then he will call on himself the police. Now this is interesting because when the police arrives, Barbara is lying dead on the floor and is still eating. He goes to jail, something like 8 months, and is Rikers, but it is like not proper jail because he's under psychiatric review. After that, he managed to get out of jail, surprisingly. Naturally surprising. But then he goes back to living to her grandma, mother of Barbara, and then there something else happens, because after something like 6 days, he stabs her grandma, who eventually is going to survive, and then he ends up in jail again. After the first hearing, he will die suicidal in his cell. So it's a tragic, very tragic story, but that is how it went all down. But let's not get lost here, and let's move quickly to the second story. And so I guess that all we have to say here is that this simply is somewhat life. But here in the picture you guys see story number 2. It's the story of Evelyn Nesbit. We are at the end of the 19th century, and she's a model. She's a high-profile model with the passion for acting, and she's on stage at the theater and acting and performing. She was seen by a very relevant for that time architect something like 40 times. The architect in question here is Stanford White, and so naturally he has at a certain point the opportunity to talk to her. So Stanford White at a certain point asks her out, and they go to Madison Square Garden. There he is, spending on champagne, a lot of champagne. He basically made her drunk, if you like, or just covered her with champagne. So they drink a lot, right? But then probably there was something else in the drink, because what happens is that they spend the night together. She has no memory, no recollection, none whatsoever of what happened that night. But she wakes up next morning, and all she sees is that she is in bed with this man. Now he's 48. She is 16 at the time. She's completely devastated. The man seems to act completely normal. She's completely devastated by that. So she also struggles to go back and act on stage, and so she finds herself in a period of hardship. That is, at least, up until she meets Harry, though. So basically, what happens here is that Harry Doll starts to take care of her and also a little bit of her mother. Um, Brings her or takes her to Europe. We are in Germany when he does exactly the same thing that Stanford White had done previously to her. Now, he knew perfectly what he was doing because Evelyn Nesbit had already told him, but he decides that the best thing to do in this situation is to make her feel again what she had felt the first time. Now, we also know that she manages to escape again, goes back to the US, right? Interestingly, Henry, though, is everything but Stanford White. He's feeling guilty and he wants to apologize and redeem himself from or for what he has done. So what he does is for 2 years he insisted in a very excuse my term, but perverted way. He insisted on her on receiving her forgiveness and her understanding, and so eventually they actually get married. But here the plot twists again. So now they're married and they decide that they want to go on a honeymoon, and they are about to leave for Europe. Before Europe, however, the first stop is New York, and specifically the Madison Square Garden. There, they will meet Stanford White, who is the name who first raped Evelyn Nesbit, and Henry, though, at that point, pulls out of his pockets a gun, and so he fires 3 bullets at Stanford White. One of those bullets will hit the teeth, another one will go and hit the shoulder, and the other one hits the head. So while shooting, though, he's screaming, "You ruined my wife's life." But certainly here what happens is that Stanford White dies pretty much immediately, right? So he has just barely probably the time to realize whatever's going on. At this point, the husband of Evelyn Nesbit ends up in prison. Now he undergoes a trial. The trial is known as Trial of the Century, and here something further happens, and something even more interesting happens. That is, Evelyn Nesbit first supports her husband, but then at a certain point in the middle of the trial, she changes side and basically blames her husband for everything. She starts saying basically he had no ground to do what he did, and so on and so forth. The position of Elizabeth Nesbit changes immediately right after her family, but also apparently those family decide to not to support Harry, though. But let's move on and let's go to our third story. So the third woman here is Hui Lan Ku, also known as Madame Wellington. But before we get there, she was an Indonesian heiress. She had risen to prominence in all the best parties of her day for her elegance, her intelligence, and her eccentricity. She meets at a certain point of her life a British consulate agent, Beauchamp Caulfield Stoker, and basically they get married. And he takes her to the UK, to England. Here she finds a new freedom, a new type of freedom, because the society was very different at the time. She could attend, a bunch of parties and actually get in contact and mingle with people. People also from all walks of life and people from different experiences. And so this is everything but what Beauchamp Cofield Stocker wants. And so even the birth of their first and only child doesn't help the couple so much, because by 1919 she files for divorce. Among the reasons that led her to file for divorce, there's indignity and cruelty. And basically, she mentions the fact that Beauchamp, in over a decade of their marriage, has never introduced her to his parents, which Beauchamp says is because his wife was not worth it. And so you understand that this is not necessarily the ideal situation for a marriage. So Hui Lan Ku goes back home to her mom specifically, right? And she decided to act like a matchmaker. It is indeed the mother that arranges the first meeting between Hui Lan and the Chinese diplomat Wellington Ku. They meet, they get engaged, then they get married, then they have two sons. In 1923, the couple moved to Beijing, and there Wellington Koo became briefly Premier and Interim President of the Republic of China, so a very prestigious position. However, the outbreak of the Second World War meant that Huilan was separated from her husband for long periods of time, and the two couldn't survive the distance. And so basically, they also filed for divorce. Tragically, Madame Wellington Koo outlived not only her two husbands but also her three children.
Our next story is about Edward the Eighth. He was the uncle of the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, and he's very well known for the scandal of abdicating the throne to marry Wallis Simpson. But the reason why this story concerns him is not because of Wallis Simpson, but rather because of Thelma Furness. She was initially married to Marmaduke Furness. She had this first marriage, which was pretty horrible, though it was quite short. And anyway, they were married. He was a little bit of a cheater, and so the marriage didn't last that long. So initially, Thelma Furness had a fairy tale type of beginning with Marmaduke Furness. But we already mentioned that he was a little bit of a cheater. So basically, gossip started circulating around. Now, Furness, through the marriage, had become Viscountess. And so she had the opportunity to meet Edward the Eighth first, like one time where they met and whatnot, right? They met, they had a conversation, but nothing happened at that point in time. Gossip around him having multiple affairs continued for other 3 years, and then something happened. The first daughter of Marmaduke actually invited Thelma Furness to laissez-faire. She met one more time Edward the Eighth, and there's something seemed to click. Now, basically, when they met again, they started to have a relationship. First, they spent a weekend in Fort Belvedere, and there the relationship started. Mama Duke at the point calls her up and says, I want to save our marriage. And so she actually takes a break from the relationship with Edward VIII. And so she goes to Nairobi, so we are in Kenya. They tried to save their marriage. However, when things seemed to go really well, gossip resurfaced with Mama Duke having multiple affairs, and therefore she actually decided to interrupt that relationship and that marriage. So she knows perfectly well that Edward cannot really marry her because he is heir to the throne.
But anyway, she seems happy, right? And things are proceeding pretty much very well. And that is up until basically sister invites her to California. The sister was living at the time in California, so she left to spend some time with sister and just enjoy her company. She recommended him to a friend. It is pointless to say that this friend was Wallace Simpson. And so when she came back to him. She quickly discovered that she had been betrayed by both of them. Wallace Simpson, who was the dear friend who had to take care of Edward VIII, and at the same time by Edward himself, because she finds out that there were like phone calls and things going on, so she understood at the time that that was the truth. So she has some sort of revenge when she gets together with the Prince Ali Khan, but even that relationship doesn't last for long. And anyway, with that being said, basically what happens is that she never forgets about him. She never forgets Edward the Eighth, and so when she dies in 1970, she has like a little teddy bear in her purse that he had given her some time before. In the words of Claudia Vanderbilt, um, she had always been in love with him, and this wasn't even like necessarily her fault or anything, so just simply things that happen. With that being said, though, let's go to protagonist number 5. We're talking about one of the swans of Truman Capote, this woman right here. She is Gloria Guinness, and she was one of the most fascinating and interesting women at that time. We are about after the Second World War, and she's one of the swans of Truman Capote. She has one first marriage, completely irrelevant to us. And the second marriage, though, is way more important because it's with von Fusselberg. We know that during the Second World War, she was in Madrid. She was in Madrid, and some of her fans actually, some of the sources that we have say that she was neutral, and many of them report that she was a spy working for the Nazi. Among her friends, we do find Hitler himself and Göring, and so we understand that having that kind of friendships might have made her into a spy very easily. I mean, it's not, and it wasn't that easy to get so close to those type of people. So she was pretty much a pathological liar. She would make up completely inventing stories on every type of situation, completely false and completely like surreal almost. But she could get out of any trouble basically thanks to that. So she was completely a psycho in that sense. For instance, she would say that her dad was a revolutionary and her mother was of poor origins, so that she had somehow inherited the strength that comes with humble origins. and things like that. Anyway, she gets divorced from von Fürstenberg, and then she meets Ahmad Fakhri Bey, grandson of King of Egypt. She has a not very long relationship with him. Anyway, the relationship lasts a couple of years. She meets him like in 1949, and then in 1951 actually, we have the meeting with Guinness, the Mogul Guinness. The first wife of Guinness had left him, or anyway, after the divorce, she had entertained a relationship with Ali Khan, who was also the lover of um, Thelma Furness. And here, the situation gets very complicated. But anyway, Gloria is, you know, capable, very well capable of keeping up with the scandals of the family. She picked up a couple of lovers, but anyway, the relationship with Guinness continued, and so eventually, then she dies in Switzerland in very suspicious circumstances. Many believed that she actually committed suicide because she couldn't tolerate boredom and not having enough drama, and she was somewhat isolated because now she was older, and so out of like the best part of her life kind of thing. So this could be an option. Anyway, we couldn't leave you without a last story about Gladys Dickon. Her childhood is already very interesting because the father found out that the wife was cheating. So the father actually shot at the guy and then went to prison. And anyway, she was very early um, in contact and had started very early a relationship with the ninth Duke of Marlborough. Probably she fell in love with him at the very beginning, but at the time he was married with Consuelo Vanderbilt, and she was very young. So anyway, nothing happened during this first stay, um, but then some years later she went back. The Duke was still married, but this time around she managed in the impossible enterprise of becoming his lover and at the same time being like a great friend to her. So they're gonna stay together for at least 20 years, right? And this marriage will not be um, rumored as a very scandalous marriage, so cheating here is not a problem. She was very young at the time, certainly way younger than he was, still obsessed with her beauty. So she decided to go to Paris and get basically plastic surgery. So she was injected with wax made of like paraffin, and she was injected in the jawline, and also around the area of her nose, this portion. So she had all that area of her face injected, right? As you guys can easily imagine, what happens is that all that wax transmigrated and left her completely disfigured. So she slowly withdrew from her public life, and friends reported that she started having more and more bizarre and erratic behaviors. One of the weirdest and also probably most sinister thing that she would do is to sleep by herself and also sleep with a revolver under her pillow. And so naturally, that was to keep her husband away, because if you don't want to see anybody, the ideal is not too close to lock the door. It's just to have a revolver so everybody around you knows. That's brilliant. I mean, it's a genius. Anyway, that was apparently the way she decided to lead the rest of her life, pretty much confined in her head state and possibly more properly in her room.
So, guys, let me know what you think. Comment below. Let me know what you make out of all of these stories. Let me know what you guys think. If any of these stories was justifiable in your mind, please, please, please let me know and comment below. Also, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and we're gonna talk some more next time. Bye!